You'll have heard the news that's come through in the last few minutes that it looks as though things will go ahead, and particularly that one of the three hostages named is the British hostage, Emily Damari. What is your reaction?
Well, I think, Trevor, first of all, as Alistair Bunkle has just said, this is very delicate. It's a fragile situation. We've just sort of heard the news already of the delay that did exist. The families in Israel must be just going through the most unimaginable anxiety right now. And the hostage names have now been released, the three hostages. Emily is clearly one of them, and her mother, Mandy. Many of us have met Mandy. We know the family. But just the sheer anxiety and apprehension that they'll be feeling is just extraordinary. So, look, I think we have to really wait and see what materialises throughout the day. This is a delicate and fragile situation. Getting here to this position has clearly not been easy, certainly for Israel and obviously for the negotiators. I think we pay tribute to the negotiators and absolutely the countries that have led this negotiation. But right now, this is very delicate. We want to obviously see all the hostages released. The start of three is incredibly essential. It's important. You know, we think of the hostages, the families constantly, but this is a very, very difficult, sensitive and delicate time. And I think all of us have to be cognizant of that.
Everybody pretty much reckons that what has happened in Washington, and you can say it's Biden, you can say it's Trump, has been critical to the delivery of this moment. What is the mood there?
So the mood here, clearly it's very focused on inauguration, and President Trump and his family arrived in Washington last night. It's very celebratory here, but I think, you know, the reality is when we speak about the hostage situation, what's going on in Gaza, the negotiations, this is really, we're at a pivotal juncture, basically. We know of Qatar, Egypt, obviously the Americans' involvement. At the end of the day, we've seen such unimaginable suffering on both sides, and we all want to see an end to that. And everyone has worked together very strategically and collaboratively to get to this particular juncture. That's important. Here in Washington, of course, the mood is very much looking forward to the inauguration. Tomorrow in particular, the city itself is buzzing. There are a lot of people here. People have come in, obviously in anticipation of the inauguration. And there's a sense of change and an air of optimism here.
The other side of this particular deal, aside from the release of hostages, is Israeli withdrawal. Given that that will probably mean that the de facto controlling force in Gaza will once again become Hamas, what is your view about that? Do we now need to have, if you like, a different body language towards Hamas? For example, thinking about lifting the prescription on its UK offshoots?
Absolutely not. I was the Home Secretary that prescribed Hamas. And everything we've seen about Hamas, their conduct, the violence, the terrorism, has been completely unacceptable. These are questions now for the government as well. I actually raised many of these points in Parliament to the Foreign Secretary on Thursday when we were just hearing the first elements of this announcement of hostages being released and the potential ceasefire. I think first and foremost, Trevor, you know, recognising that this is a very fragile situation, clearly there is no immediate day one plan. We have to be very mindful, and there have been discussions, certainly from our government as well, with the leadership of the PA, the Palestinian Authority. They themselves need to go to some way to reform themselves, you know, do much more for the people of Gaza. There'll be deep discussions about reconstruction, the role that Britain will be playing. This, I think, right now is not a full and open discussion and debate. Behind the scenes, I have no doubt, certainly the British government as well will be integral to those discussions. These questions have been raised. The government and the machinery of our government and obviously our allies and partners will be very much focused on this. Today, clearly the focus is on ceasefire and getting the hostages out. We still want to see all the hostages out, but the potential organisations when it comes to the future of Gaza and bringing peace and stability to this part of the Middle East, this is going to require intensive work, a lot of resources, intensive resources as well, financing from other countries, but ultimately leadership and governance that is stable and acceptable for all parties and countries, not just in the region, but for the rest of the world as well, because these conflicts cannot keep on carrying on.
The Israeli government itself, of course, is not a single entity, and we understand this morning that one of the senior Israeli ministers who leads a party to the right of Mr. Netanyahu's has resigned. How confident are you that this whole agreement, after 42 days and release of the 33 hostages over that time, that phase 2, which looks towards a more permanent settlement, how confident are you that everybody's going to keep their side of it, given the politics, particularly in Israel?
I think, first of all, politics aside, we have to recognise this is a delicate situation. It's very fragile. You've heard me say this already. The focus has to be on getting the hostages out, having them all released. And with that, I'm sure everyone, I can't comment on the domestic politics in Israel other than to say there is a heavy burden on every politician that is integral to these negotiations. They have huge responsibilities to the families of the hostages. They will be aware of that. They really will. And I have no doubt they will all be straining every sinew to ensure that this works and that the hostages are released, that this agreement, this fragile ceasefire can come together. We know that this is going to take place over a phased period of time, the hostage releases, and it's in everybody's interest. Now this roadmap has been outlined. It's in everyone's interest to ensure that they all work together to get the hostages out and bring the type of stability that is essential. It's vital. All parties are calling for it. Countries are calling for it. There's a lot of hope that is really linked to this new deal and framework. And I think, everyone will urge both sides to, stick with the plan that has been outlined, recognising it's difficult, it's very sensitive. We need to see the hostages released in this first phase, others to come out, and clearly then work together in a constructive way for a better future for the region.
Obviously, it is being said, I guess, in DC that the factor that changed all of this was the election of Donald Trump and the activities of his envoy, I think it's called Mr. Wiskoff, out there. But tomorrow, as you were saying earlier on, the issue is the inauguration, the second Trump term. You may not have seen this, but Labour Mayor of London this morning has written in a national newspaper that this heralds the march of fascism. Do you agree with him?
Well, actually, I don't agree with Sadiq Khan, but that's not surprising. There's very little that I agree with the Mayor of London on. I think, first of all, tomorrow is the inauguration of the next President of the United States. I think we have to respect the fact that he has a very significant mandate. The American people voted clearly, categorically for him, his policies, the proposals that he outlined. And it's really not for politicians in other countries to start making disrespectful and disparaging comments about President-elect Trump. At the end of the day, he will announce his policy platform. He has the mandate. He's clear that he wants to bring hope and optimism to the United States. He wants to give the American people a better future. And we should respect that. He has a clear mandate. He wants to bring about change. The American people voted for that. And I can tell you now, where I'm sitting here in Washington, the mood is one of hope and optimism. And people here were tired of conflicts that were taking place in the world, an economy that people felt wasn't working for them. And they're now looking to their new president with a degree of hope and optimism.
What you've summarised there is the America First agenda. America First, I think most of us would think means everybody else second, including the imposition of tariffs on trading partners like us. Does Mr. Trump mean it, or is he bluffing?
Well, look, that's Trevor, you will not be surprised by my position on this at all. America is a long-standing, deep ally of the United Kingdom, and our two relationships have always been built on mutual respect and trust. Now, my party's not in government, the Labour government, it's down to them now to really forge a strong relationship with President Trump and his new administration. I would argue that, first of all, and I've said this previously, the government should be really advocating, building upon the foundations that we put in place for a trade arrangement, therefore not even entering these discussions around tariffs. Now, President Trump is within his rights to make the statements that he wants around tariffs, sending out clear signals to other countries, but as ever, this is a discussion and a negotiation. It'll be a government-to-government one. And I would really implore, I'd urge Keir Starmer's government to step up to the plate right now, start good, strong, solid negotiations and interactions with the Trump government, rather than making disparaging remarks, as we've just heard from Sadiq Khan and previous remarks that have been made by Labour ministers.
OK, never mind the government. You could be helpful here, couldn't you? Because you've got an invitation, and that's partly because of, if you like, your political alignment with the Republican Party. But interestingly, Mr. Nigel Farage, who has also been invited, seems to be a favourite down in Mar-a-Lago. Are you going to have to make peace with Nigel Farage in order to get a hearing in the White House?
I just don't think that's a relevant point. At the end of the day, the Conservative Party and the Republican Party, they're our sister parties. We have enduring, long-standing ties with the Republican Party. Our two parties in government and out of government have worked closely together over decades. In the past, two governments ending the Cold War, bringing economic prosperity around the world, as well as for our two countries. We're, the reform, we're not a pop-up act in the way in which they are, and their presence is here right now. Our two parties are knitted together in the very principles of conservatism, and our DNA on values and beliefs is incredibly strong. So I don't think that's particularly relevant. I think, importantly, I have worked with the last Trump government when I was Home Secretary. I have a track record, certainly, in working on national security, homeland security, the real issues that matter to the British people and the American people, and those ties will continue.